Here's the deal. We're all pretty smart. I mean, this is the information age. We finally arrived and now ooze with intelligence. However, it wasn't always like it is today. About 2,000 years ago, a guy named Ptolemy thought that the universe revolved around the Earth. And it wasn't until about 500 years ago that people realized, hey, maybe this Earth isn't flat. Sure, that was the Stone Age, but it's still been a slow process for man. But even the past 100 years has been filled with misguided wisdom. Check it. In 1899, the Patent Office president was ready to close up shop because, according to him, everything that could be invented had been. Gosh, I can't think of anything that's been invented since then. Let me think. Anyway. Or how about Wilbur Wright in 1901 saying man would not fly for 50 years? Wilbur, thanks for the first successful flight only a couple of years after you said that. Oh, here's a favorite of mine. In 1908, Henry Ford's lawyer said, "The horse is here to stay. The automobile is only a novelty, a fad." Wow, you got two things wrong in one quote, and undermine your client's work. That's impressive. Well, you know this one. A technical journal said, and I quote, "The Titanic is made practically unsinkable, except for the fact that it sank." That last part was me, not the quote. Or how about when Henry M. Warner of Warner Brothers asked a doozy? He said, "Who wants to hear actors talk?" I'm like, everybody, unless it's a Keanu movie. Or this, the father of radio said in 1967, "Man will never reach the moon, regardless of all future scientific advances." This quote became garbage 2 years later. Or how about the founder of IBM who once said, "There is a world market for maybe 5 computers." Add about 8 zeros and you hit it right on the head, buddy. Okay, that's enough. Now look, I realize some of these comments were somewhat recent, but here's the cool part. I think the tide has finally turned and we have reached a state of enlightenment. Because honestly, we're stinking smart. Now, it is okay to say that man has all the answers. I mean, hey, what's that? Wait, hang on, I can't read this backwards, let me see. What? This is ridiculous. Hey, who put this here? Hey, Tony, well, go find out. This is crazy, guys. Is this a joke? No, of course I'm mad. This is ridiculous. Oh, yeah? Well, we'll just see about that, won't we? Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm out of here, pal. Hey, move. I'm gone. I am gone, man.
Yeah, sometimes we do think we're a little too smart, don't we? I don't think any of us have been completely immune to that one, have we? So last night, I found myself, which I didn't know would be happening, but found myself at a place called Bodeborg. Has anybody heard of that place before? You've been there? Okay. I'd never even heard of this place, but my wife and I ended up there last night. It's a quest room where you go, or quest like building, where you go through all of these different, there's mazes, there's like problems you have to solve. It's a great place to kind of slap you in the face that you're not really smart. They tell you before you even start that on average, people fail every quest 10 times before they get it right. And we had some where we were a lot more than 10, and we didn't get it right. It's a tough place. I didn't know we would be there when I planned on preaching today, what we would be talking about. God obviously knew. But there are realities in life where you're kind of reminded that we can overestimate ourselves, right? We can overestimate our wisdom, our intelligence, how smart we are. We can overestimate those things. The point that I'm trying to make isn't that we should just say, oh, we don't know anything at all, and we should just all give up. That's not the point. But the point is that we have to see our intellect in light of God's intellect. And when that is in perspective, everything changes. Everything changes. You see his wisdom, then you see man's puny little wisdom. Some of which is, at times helpful and all of that. And God just looks at it all and says, what are you doing? That's really not going to help you in the end. And you're building your entire life on it. And you're selling books, teaching other people to build their lives on it. And here I am in the heavens with all eternal wisdom. We're not as smart as we think we are. that just showed the pattern, right? That just showed that there's a pattern in humanity to overestimate our intelligence and make these bold claims, and then 2 years later, oops, I guess we can go to the moon, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible. Like, it's not going to happen. Oh, wait, yeah, actually, it did 2 years later. Maybe you've had moments like that where you kind of said something very boldly, and then you're like corrected maybe 30 seconds later or a day later, and you're like, oh, shoot, I definitely overstepped there. I definitely overspoke my knowledge, right? We do that sometimes. And so we need to get a good view of God. We need to get a good view of wisdom, his wisdom, not our wisdom. But we need to see him sitting in the heavens with his wisdom, with his insight, because that's when life starts to make sense. That's when life starts to make sense. We as humans live on an earth, right? And we all get into these things where we all try to explain to each other how life works and what's supposed to happen and what's not supposed to happen. And it's not supposed to be this way, it's supposed to be this way. And no, I disagree, it's supposed to be this way. And then, no, wait, we have consensus. A whole bunch of us agree. And then, wait a minute, history just proved us wrong. And we get into all of this intertwining of thinking we know. And God sits in the heavens. And he knows. And in some ways, isn't that almost a little bit laughable? What we do. I mean, imagine I was just at this Boda Borg place last night, right? So imagine if I went in there and I was going through it with the people that actually like developed the whole thing and knew exactly how to get through everything as fast and as perfectly as possible in that setting. And we're just like, no, we don't want to listen to you. We know what we're doing, right? That's what we're talking about here, is that's a reality of pride within humanity. It's a reality of pride within humanity. We've been talking about a lavishing of grace onto us as the church. This lavishing of grace at the end of verse 8 in our text last week left us kind of with a cliffhanger a little bit. It said he lavished his grace on us in all wisdom and insight. And I don't know how many of you left saying, what is that wisdom and insight? Like, what does that mean? Or maybe you didn't. But today, we want to think through that a little bit. He lavished his grace on us in the church, those who have put their faith in Jesus Christ. He lavished his grace on you in wisdom and insight. We've been trying to make sure we expand or elevate our view, see a bigger view is a better way to say it maybe, of God's grace. That it's not just this little thing, it's actually a massively huge thing that helps make sense of everything for us. We've been trying to do that over the past 2 weeks here. And so what we see here is his grace is in wisdom and insight. So now let's separate from that a little bit and go back to us, doing our thing without looking to God and saying, what do you want us to know? What do you want us to hear? And we're like, oh, I want to be gracious. I want to be kind. Oh, I'm going to I won't get mad at that. That's what grace is. And just overlook this, and that's what grace is. And there's no holding it up to God. That's not grace. When we're just all here playing with his grace, and not actually like saying, God, what do you want us to do with this? We completely miss it. Right? Isn't that what it says? That he lavished it in wisdom and insight? It doesn't say he made us so wise and insightful that we have all the answers of how to live out his grace, does it? Okay, so you're with me. We have to see this in light of God. We have to hear what he says about this. As we're going through this, I have a question, and like I say, maybe you've had this question too, is why was this lavishing so wise and insightful? I mean, that's what I've been racking my brain with for a long time here. Why was this lavishing so wise and insightful? Because he just kind of says it, right? And I think even just the saying it perks us up a little bit and says, okay, I need your wisdom and insight, God, and I think that's part of the point. But he just goes on. Remember, this is one nonstop sentence where Paul just keeps talking, and he's connecting the whole thing, and you're like, what's his main point, and how does it all fit? And it's so complex, it's hard to really get through the main point, but then he gets to this chorus, and you're like, okay, I'm good. This is also, we'll be to the praise of his glory, and we'll worship him, I get it. And then we find our footing again. So we're right in the middle of that. And what we see first is that he has made known something of his good pleasure in verse 9. He has made known something of his good pleasure. Why is this lavishing of grace so wise and insightful? There's part of it we can't know if we don't hear what's in verse 9, that God has made known something that's in accordance with, that's of his good pleasure. So when God lavishes his grace on us, it's his grace, it's his self-giving that we don't deserve, welcoming us into a relationship with him. It is that, but he lavishes it, he pours it on us in all wisdom, not just a little bit, and in all insight, not just a little bit. And then he does this, how? The first thing is that he made something known. He made something known. Look at verse 9 with me. So Ephesians 1:9, if you're not there already, go ahead and turn there. I want you to read it in your own Bible first, and then we'll look at what's on the screen here together. So we probably have some different translations or versions, and we're going to see some differences in some of these two verses here today, verses 9 and 10. And so I want to think through some of this here together. But Ephesians 1:9, reading out of my Bible here, says, he made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his kind intention, which he purposed in him. Maybe yours read a little bit differently, probably fairly similarly on this one. So let's go through some of this. So I have on here the words in the original language, the Greek that it was originally written in, also in English. We're really going to see whether this matters when we get into verse 10. But I want us to see the whole thing here in both this morning. So what we see is that he made known, or really it could be having made known. It could be having made known. It's an aorist active participle, and everybody knows what that is, right? Aorist active participle. That means it's like a snapshot. He's trying to describe the whole process of something, and it is an active participle. It's something God did. And it's expressed in the ing is a participle. If you know English, that's when you read the ing, that tends to be a participle. So it's a verb, but that's how it's happening. And it's hard to know the timing is part of the point, because that's not God's point. The point is he wants you to wrap your head around the process of the making known. And it's translated, he made known in a lot of the versions, because that fits with the lavishing that we know already happened. So it's not wrong if your version says he made known. And that's what they're doing, is they're making sense of that in light of what's already happened there. So he made known, or having made known to us, the mystery of the will. Whose will is it? His. According to the good pleasure. There's a good pleasure. Whose is it? It's his, which he set forth or purposed in him. Maybe your version there says in himself. Maybe your version there says in Christ. Maybe your version there says in him. It says all three, depending on which version you have. If yours says in Christ, please know it does not say that. That's the translators making a choice there. If yours says in him or in himself, that's a literal good translation of this. And so God within himself has made known something. And what does he call it? What's he call what he's made known? I want you to say it. Made known to us the mystery. Anybody love mysteries? Some people? Okay. All right, so we have a few mystery lovers. So there's something to mystery novels, mystery movies, mystery stories. Escape rooms are popular for a reason, right? There's something to this process of going through something and knowing there's an answer, knowing there's an end that's going to make sense of everything. You're walking through it and you're like, I'm not sure what this is. I think I know, and I'm not sure, and I see it, but I don't see it. Maybe I'm right. And you get to moments, and you're like, yes, I'm right. I got this part. There is something to that that sucks us in, right? Why is that? Have you ever wondered? You know why I think that is? Because God's ordered our world that way. He's ordered our entire world that way. We as a church are a part of that. He has made known to us the mystery of his will. What in the world is that? And when did he make that known, right? He made known to us the mystery of his will. I feel like his will is a mystery. What are you talking about? I don't know what he wants for me each day. I don't know what he wants for me tomorrow. I'm struggling. You need to hear today that he has made known something of his good pleasure. To stop all of that, I don't know his will, 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 and just sit with what he has made known. Why? Partially because it'll just stop all of the craziness swirling around in your head and bring you to a place of peace. That's part of it. I am not saying this verse tells you you can know exactly everything about, like, the day you're born, all right, this is the person that I'm going to marry, and I don't have to do anything in life to figure that out. That's not what this is saying. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying when we savor, sit in what has been made known, there is peace. There is peace in his presence, and it's not this, all the pressure's on me to figure everything out, and hopefully I don't mess it up and displease God, right? Or maybe you've never felt that way. And I think most of you have felt that way sometimes, right? Well, how do we get around that feeling? We actually see part of it in this verse. He made known to us the mystery of his will. And it was according to what? Whoa. So when we're trying to figure out what's pleasing to him, he's actually made something known that will help us do that? That's pretty cool. What is it? What are we talking about here? When we hear the word mystery, you can read this word a lot of times in the New Testament. By the way, the Greek word for mystery is mystery. It's just kind of brought across. It's mysterion, same word, right? It sounds very similar. And so you can read this throughout the New Testament, and I don't want you to hear this, that every time you read the word mystery, it means exactly the same thing. It doesn't. Let me give you an example. 1 Corinthians 15:51, behold, I tell you a mystery. Well, what is that? We will not all sleep, but we all will be changed. So that's a mystery. This mystery is different than the one he's talking about in Ephesians. Now, it's connected, and they're all interspersed and interplayed because we're walking through this Bodeborg of life, this escape room of life, where it's all fit and it's all wisely connected and put together, but you're trying to discern it and learn it and walk through it. And so it all fits, but I don't want you to go to the Bible and say, every time it means mystery, it means the same thing. It means we're all going to be changed and made like Jesus. Is that the mystery here in Ephesians 1 that he's made known? It's not. And I want to walk us through some passages so that you don't just take my word for it. You can actually see it for yourself. Here's what I think we should think. These are my words. How I think we can understand mystery in Ephesians. I'm not saying in the whole of the New Testament, but in Ephesians. Here's how I think we can understand it. The mystery revealed is that God would unite Jew and Gentile into one new man in the Messiah. And so he's saying he's made that known. This was a mystery. You read through the Bible, and what you see is God blessed Israel to be a blessing, and you're seeing this. But wait a minute, before that, there was this whole area where there was no Israel. And there was the Gentiles, there was the nations, and God was working in the nations, and then he's working in Jerusalem or in Israel. What is happening? How does this all fit? And we're in the middle of this escape room, so to speak, right? And we're seeing, how does this all fit together? And then in this lavishing of grace, God made something known. This is what he made known. He made other things known too, but this is, I believe, what Paul is talking about. The mystery revealed is that God would unite Jew and Gentile into one, quote, new man the Messiah. So let me show it to you. Ephesians 1:9. Again, he made known to us the mystery of his will. So his will had a mystery to it. Ephesians 3:3. That by revelation there was made known to me. Paul is saying there was made known to him something. The mystery, as I wrote before in brief. When did he write before in brief? In chapter 1, verse 9 that we just read. But verse 4, chapter 3, verse 4, he starts to explain this a little more. By referring to this, when you read, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Christ. See, we can understand some of this, can't we? When we read, we can understand. Verse 9, when you jump down there in chapter 3, he's talking about this grace that was given. Part of the reason this grace was given was to bring to light what is the administration of the mystery, which for ages has been hidden in God who created all things. Ephesians 5:32, this mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and what? The church. This is the church. The mystery is a church. He has been saying in Ephesians, look, before there was anything except for God, he chose you. He set your destiny before there was anything. And you read through the Bible and you're like, I get it, but shouldn't I become Jewish? Or like it seemed like things shifted at some point and started to work through Israel mostly. And there are still prophecies that haven't been fulfilled yet for Israel. And so what do I do? So God made it really clear, I'm unveiling a mystery. Church, you are the mystery. That's what he's saying. That God in this age, what he is doing is he's uniting, whether you're Jewish or whether you're from any other nation, into one new man, he says in Ephesians. We're going to see. Okay? So you all feel really smart right now, right? So what I'm not trying to do today is to make all of this so neat and clean and tie a little bow on it that we all walk away and can teach everybody. Why? This is God's wisdom. If I think I can do that, who in the world do I think I am, right? Part of what I want us to do is just be in awe of his wisdom, in awe of his insight. And I realize that's different. I realize sometimes there are texts that just give us a principle. We need to submit to it and live it out or claim it by faith or something. This isn't one of those texts. This is one of those texts that just says, God is lavishing his wisdom and insight on you, and it's got to blow your mind a little bit. It has to stretch your thinking a little bit. You have to let yourself feel a little bit not smart. You have to let yourself say, I see it, but I have a lot of questions. So that you can take those questions to God and start to trace them out and learn from him and not answer for him. He made known to us the mystery of his will. His will permeates this text back in chapter 1. His will permeates. It's all through this text. Chapter 1, verse 1. God called Paul to the work he did according to his own will. Chapter 1, verse 5. Our adoption is according to the good pleasure of God's will. Chapter 1, verse 11. He works all things after the counsel of his will. Twice in this passage, we see this phrase, good pleasure or kind intention, used. Isn't that interesting? So he's pulling us into something where we get insight to see what pleases God. God took pleasure in setting forth something called the church. How does that make you feel? All right, so let's take a step back now. I know I've been kind of moving us forward, and believe me, this is there's so many things to connect to this. everything I just said could have probably been about 5 sermons. And I know I'm not smart enough to say what I'm saying today or to preach the 5 sermons, but God made some of this clear so we can know it, and a lot of it clear so we can know it. So see what the text says, please. Hopefully my words help you get there. So let's take a step back from this a little bit. God's will has this good pleasure. He brought forth that this time, this is our time, in this age, God is working through the church, and guess what? He takes pleasure in that. Meanwhile, we're taking a step back. We're over here. Hey, you need to go get that job. Hey, you need to get back at that person because they wronged you. Hey, you need to fix your marriage. What's wrong with you? Hey, your parenting style, it's terrible. Hey, no, mine's amazing. I can show you how to do it. We're doing all of these things. God takes pleasure. The pleasure of his goodwill is set forth in something called the church. Do we understand that? Do we feel the weight of that? I hope we start to. Everything we do in life, the decisions we make, the decisions we avoid, everything we do in life ties in to God's sovereignty. Everything. And I realize that kind of blows our minds a little bit. But he has made this known. Let me just say something super practical. If God made good pleasure of his will known for us in this age, and he called it the mystery, the church, and we don't value the church, are we walking in his wisdom and insight? So the redemption, the lavishing of the redemption was not just on individuals, was it? It is on individuals. Yes, I am saved by putting my faith in Jesus Christ, and if I don't, I'm not. However, in his wisdom and insight, he jumps right to verse 9. He made known the mystery of his will. The mystery is that he gave Phil all of this wisdom and insight just to live it out, because I have Jesus, I have all I need. Do you see that in that text? No, it's not what it says. He says he did it in a mystery. He did it in a mystery. Don't hear in that he hasn't made known the climax, because he actually did. When you read through mysteries in the New Testament, it's something that was once hidden but now revealed. It's once hidden, but now God made it clear in Christ. It's once hidden, but the wow moment came, and it's in Jesus. That's the mystery that we read through in the New Testament. It's the mystery of his will. It is according to his good pleasure. We see also in verse 10, his good pleasure is positioned towards something. My words are not perfect here. I'm going to try to walk us through why I'm saying this. I'm trying to get us to understand some concepts and move in the right direction. These words are not perfect. Verse 10 is perfect. But his good pleasure is positioned towards something. It's positioned toward an administration. It's positioned toward, you could say, a way in which he would administrate the fullness of times. So this is a big deal, right? So here we are. We just kind of went through last week. We woke up this morning. Maybe some of you knew it was, the time to set your clocks, and maybe some of you didn't. You woke up in a rush, and we're doing all this, and then we come, and here God is like opening up the good pleasure of his will, lavishing it on us, and saying, I want you to sit in awe of my wisdom and insight. Because when you know my wisdom and insight, you will never doubt no matter what you face in life. And he says, he's just revealing this to us. I have this administration for the fullness of times. I'm doing something that's like the wave is crested. It's ready to crash. Everything is exciting, and we're just on the tip of that on our surfboard hanging out there. And some of us are like, I don't know how to surf, and that's scary. And others are like, this is awesome. And the more you know how to surf, the more fun that is, right? So the more you know his truth and his grace, the more fun it is. So there's aspects to his grace which you can't know unless you grow in what you know. Maybe that was a weird way to say that, but there are aspects of his grace that we have to grow in. And we grow in it in knowledge, right? Because he lavished it on us in wisdom and insight. He made something known. What he made known was the church matters. That's what he made known. And so he made that known. He revealed that. Are we listening, and are we growing in why it matters? Or are we trying to discern God's will for this and for that and for this and for that? I don't need relationships with anybody at church. He made it known, his good pleasure made known in the church. Some of you know what that feels like. We've tried to figure things out on your own, and then you finally say, okay, God, I want to learn your way. And then you're like, I don't want to do this with other people. Some of this is humbling. Some of this is hard. Some of this is heavy. I want to do it alone. You know what God tends to do? He tends to keep pushing you towards people in the church. Do you get the hint? It matters. And his good pleasure that was made known when he revealed that the church wasn't an afterthought, it was part of his foreordained wisdom, part of that good pleasure, it says it's positioned toward this administration. Now let's go to verse 10 and try to make sense of what I just said. I realize we're getting into some stuff here that you're like, my mind was not ready for this. I know that, but here's the thing. This is what the text says. And we have to see what it says. And what I'm doing now is I'm telling you just a little bit of what's here. So, this first word, ice, when we transliterate it in English, it's E-I-S, ice. In some versions, like mine, it says with a view to. That's all coming from that word. Some say in, some say unto. This word ice usually it means to, toward, or unto, in. It's translated in those kind of ways. So there's a direction to it, right? It's in, it's to, it's toward, it's unto. And so God's good pleasure isn't just somewhere out in the heavens that nobody can ever access, is it? Isn't that pretty cool? He directed it toward something. Well, what did he direct it towards? An administration. Oikonomion. Oikonomion. Oikos is the Greek word for house. Nomion is the Greek word for law, house law. God directed his good pleasure toward a way to order a house is kind of the word that is used. You might see oikonomion or oikonomion when I read it. Maybe you hear the word economy in there. That was in there too. It was kind of their word for the way they ordered their houses reflected how good their economy was doing. And so it was connected in that word. So there's some people kind of tie this in. There's an economy of grace that God has. Administration. What does yours say? It might say administration. It might not. Somebody shout it out. Do your versions say different things? Administration. Plan. Anything else? Put into effect. All right. So we have ESV, NIV. King James uses a word dispensation. And this word was used in this way. Like if you go to a medical clinic, somebody has to be in charge of dispensing the stuff, right? And so dispensation is one of the words that this has been translated into. And so God has this way of working that he kind of meters things out in wisdom and insight. And this is the way he's had the whole world work. And so he has this plan that he administrates, that he rules this, reigns this. We're going to dig into this word as we go through Ephesians because Paul uses it a lot. So we're going to get into this word. But I want us to hear just a few part of what he says in Ephesians 3:8 through 13. To me, the very least of all the saints, this grace was given to preach to the Gentiles or nations the unfathomable riches of Christ. So his riches are so good they're unfathomable. And to bring to light what is the administration of the mystery. So Paul was bringing to light something that wasn't known before. He was bringing to light something that there he calls it the administration of this mystery. How will God do this thing of Jewish people and Gentile, the nations, all in one new person? What will that look like? Will all of us still go to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices? Will we do that? What will our sanctification look like? How will we be set apart for Jesus? What will that look like? You realize if you lived in that time, that was a really pressing question for them. Because they literally were like, I'm Jewish. We have to do it this way. This is the way it's always been. Haven't you read the Bible? And then other people are like, I'm Gentiles, and Jesus said I belong. I don't know where I fit in. And what happened is in the fullness of time, Jesus came, right? You read that in Galatians 4. In the fullness of time, Jesus came. He was born of a woman, born under the law to fulfill the law, the Old Testament law, which he did perfectly because he's God. So he fulfilled this, and in the death of Jesus, we're going to read in Ephesians, the dividing wall between Jew and Gentile was broken, and we're brought into this one new man, and we have to figure out how to live. And then Paul says, I'm the least of all the saints because I was the guy who was trying to murder you all like a couple years ago. But God called me to bring to light something, and so I'm humbly going to bring this to light. Here's what he called me to bring to light, that we're a new entity. This isn't a replacement for what God was doing. It's actually a bringing in of something else that was not really expected. It's a surprise. We thought we were getting through to the end of this escape room, the Boda Borg. We thought we were at the end, and then we found out there's another room for a little while. But that final room is still coming, where Jesus will come and rule and reign and put all things under his feet in Israel. But in this age, he's administrating his grace in a unique and powerful way through something called the church. So the whole second half of Ephesians is just going to be like, what should marriages look like? How do we worship? How does all of this fit together? How do we get on the same page as a church when there's not quite as many laws as there is for Israel in their worship? How do we do all of this? And so that's what the second half of the book of Ephesians is. I'm going to take a breath now. Let your minds rest for a second. All right, you ready? No? Okay. So let's take a step back here. Again, my goal today is not to show you all of the connections. Not because those aren't important, but because there are so many. And I haven't even begun to see all of them that are in the scriptures. My point today is not that. My point today is to bring us to the place where we're just in awe of his wisdom and insight. So let's just take a step back here a second. He's talking about something coming to a head, all things coming to a head, or coming to a sum, all things summed summed up in Jesus, some of the versions say. All things are summed up in Jesus. They come to a head in Jesus, all things. And it's, by the way, in the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah is who he's referring to there. What are all of these things? They're things in heavens and they're things on the earth. Does that cover it? So it's everything that was created, right? So God exists before anything else. His good pleasure within himself, the Father relating to the Spirit, relating to the Son with joy and good pleasure, not lacking anything. And out of the overflow of that, he says, I'm going to create. And first he creates this unseen realm with principalities and rulers and different rankings and all of these creatures and beings that are out there that we can't see. He speaks that out because he creates with his word, right? That exists. All of that now is summed up in Jesus, and that was his plan from before, right? But wait a minute, what if one of those thinks they're smarter than God? They're so smart, they can do it better than God, and they lead some of those angels in rebellion. What if that happens? Did that surprise God? No, he had a view from before the foundation of the world to a summing up of all things in Jesus. That didn't rattle him at all. But after he created the unseen realm, he created the seen realm, right? Angels were there. The saved ones, at least, were like, yay, your power is amazing. Look at that ocean you just made, how you separated those things. Look at that animal. What is that? Now, what is that dirt you're making into somebody? Ooh, that's a person, human? What is that? So they're like in awe, looking into it, and his wisdom and creation and insight. They're looking into that. He creates us, and we do the same thing. We rebel against God. And God had a plan for the fullness of times already. So initially, what does he do? He goes and says, I have a way of covering your guilt and your sin, your rebellion against me. But when there's sin, there must be shedding of blood. An animal dies, their guilt and their shame is covered, and they're made right with God. That was the gospel at the beginning of the Bible. That's what they heard. That's what they knew. They knew sacrifices were important, and that's about it. And that's what you read in Job. He took his faith very seriously, but he didn't have everything we have, did he? And that was according to God's good pleasure. It was for that time. So when we hear the word times, by the way, there's two different words in the Greek for times. One is chronos and one is kairos. One means like the clock time, minutes, hours. So that chronology, chronos. One is kairos, so it's more like a moment. Like we say, I need a moment. You don't literally mean I need 1 second, right? You're not thinking about the time you need. You just know you need time. That's the word kairos. That's the word he uses in verse 10. And so he's talking about these times or seasons in which God worked through all of history and will continue to work. And so that first one was just after they were here with God, we're good and we're relating to him. That was broken. Then it's just an animal died, my guilt is covered, I'm right with God, and I trust you. And if they trusted in the promise of a future seed of a descendant of Eve, that's all God required of them. Then that kind of developed, right? Because humans screwed it up, and that showed that we're weak, and that wasn't enough for us. We needed more because we're pretty weak as humans. And so it kind of starts to unfold, and there's this beautiful promise plan that unfolds as God works with people and makes promises. That promise unveils. There's another promise unveils. Then we have Israel, this people made, and they keep messing it up a lot of times too, just like we do, right? And God says, you know what? You're my chosen people. You're the apple of my eye. I've set Jerusalem at the center of the earth, and I'm not going to stop. And we get to the fullness of times. Jesus comes, and Israel says, we don't want you, Jesus. And Jesus cries, and he weeps and says, don't you get my wisdom and insight? I'm going to be lavishing this on you in just a few days, and you're saying no thank you. But God's plan wouldn't be stopped. He would bring in this one new man, which included the Jewish people. Because he wasn't just going to say, good riddance, people who rejected me, right? Aren't you glad he doesn't do that with us? And then this one new man is in this age, but guess what? The wave is crested. When the wave crash, what does that look like? What does that look like when the wave crashes? The book of Revelation, maybe? Time of Jacob's trouble? The time where God will purify Israel once again and set her at her right place at the center of the earth. By the way, they're already physically there, right? Waves crested. We're ready. Any moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we could be caught up and changed, and then that wave will crest. This is a lot, right? I realize this is a lot. I realize some of you are like, oh, that's cool. And I realize some of you are like, you missed about 1,000 things. And I realize some of you are like, I didn't want to hear half of that this morning. This was too much. So what do we do with this? I'm just going to try to tie all of this together. Proverbs 25:2 says, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to search it out. Isn't that the mystery thing? That's his glory. He set up the earth to work in this way that history or life would progress, and then he'd be like, ooh, we got to the next clue. There's a shift now. And it's not different. It's still the same God. It's still the same forgiveness. It's still the same holiness. It's still the same relationship. But it's shifted. It looks a little different. And then it shifts again. It looks a little different. And then the fullness of time comes, and he says, here's the mystery. The church. And so it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. So even though this destroyed our brains this morning, it's for God's glory. And I don't know what fruit that will bear in our lives this week. And I'm not going to pretend to say I do, because I don't have that wisdom and insight, but God does. So let's hone in on one place this word administration is used and be done. And just kind of take some time to sing and enjoy this back with God again. But 1 Timothy 1:4-7. What do we do with all of this? I think what we have to do with all of this, we'll see in these verses, is don't bend from this reality that God is all wise. Don't lose our focus on it. What happens when we lose our focus on it? Bad things happen. Let's listen to a description of this in 1 Timothy 1:4-7. He's warning them not to pay attention to myths, to endless genealogies. Oh, we don't do that. We're too smart. Oh, wait, right? But some of us think we are too smart. And we pay attention to myths. There are people still who pay attention to endless genealogies. What is the problem with those? They give rise to mere speculation. Mere speculation, rather than the administration of God, which is by faith. Do you hear the difference? One is us saying, God, you have all the wisdom, and you have lavished it on the church somehow, that I can enjoy it in relationship with the church in Christ. You have done that, and I'm going to trade that because my mind just goes all these places when I see a YouTube video. But are they places it should go? Right? My mind just goes all these places when I hear this person preach this. Are they places your mind should go? How do we know? The administration of God is by faith. The faith is in his Son, in the redemption, and it's in relationship with the church. Notice, maybe you've seen this, maybe you've felt this. When we start to look in and get really curious about things, and a pride starts to grow within us, we separate from the church. Maybe not physically right away, but mentally we're above, right? I have all this secret hidden knowledge. I know this stuff. You know what? You don't with that attitude, because that's the wisdom of the world. That's not God's wisdom. You don't have a clue. If your wisdom doesn't operate in a way that's in submission to his administration, you're not being wise. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that to give you hope. Because we all know when we live in our own wisdom, it fails us, right? When we will submit to the way God laid it out for us, there's freedom and there's joy. But if we don't, there's just speculation. So he says, verse 5, the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Why does this matter? Verse 6, because some men stray from these things. They turn aside to fruitless discussions, Americans. I'm not kidding. We are bad at this because we don't have a big enough view of God's glory and his grace and his administration. We don't. And we herald the sovereignty of God. God is sovereign, and I'm going to do everything for him. And again, I'm really not trying to be mean. I'm not. I hope this is a thing where kind of the wounds of a friend are helpful. Because we can turn aside to so many fruitless discussions. Check the fruit, right? Oh, I'm being so godly. Do you have peace? Well, no, but I'm being so godly and holy. Do you have joy? No. But I'm being so godly and holy. How's your love? We got to pay attention to this because it produces fruit. The fruitless discussions must be avoided. These people want to be teachers, verse 7. They want to be teachers of the law, but they don't understand what they're saying or the matters about which they make confident assertions. And they're in books, they're in sermons, they're in YouTube videos, they are everywhere, and they are confident. I'm confident about the reality that God revealed a mystery. And it says it was the uniting of Jew and Gentile into the church, and that is a lavishing of his grace. And if I get that, a whole lot of things in my life are going to go well. And there's going to be good fruit. That's all I'm confident about. Beyond that, be really careful. I don't know if this is confusing to people or helpful. I honestly don't. But I hope it at least gets you thinking. I hope it at least gets you moving. That you'll be in awe of God. Do you know how wise he is? That he worked all of history and every little fine detail of history out in a way that crested this wave, and any moment Jesus is coming back, and then he will work to set right Israel again. That's a wise God who does that. What do I have to worry about? Right? But do you worry? Yeah. Sometimes we lose sight of this. And so we're going to sing a song that just says, the same God who never fails, is he going to fail me? Do you see how little that sounds after everything I just said? And maybe that was the whole point of this morning. It's just so when we say our little things, they sound puny. The same God who never fails won't fail me. Of course he won't, right? The same God who's never late, he's not going to miss time, his grace, right? When we draw near to the throne of grace, we find perfect, well-timed help for our needs, because that's how wise God is. So we're going to sing. We're going to reflect. I realize your brain might be tired. I realize your body might be tired. I realize maybe you're just like, you talk too long. I don't know where we are. And that's okay. I'm just going to ask God to kind of draw out of us whatever he needs to.